Start talking, I guess.
All right, I'm hitting the record. Did we get it? The recording? We're good.
Yes, we
All
are
right.
recording. I guess we'll invite everybody into the conversation.
Gosh, I guess. I mean, their input's important too.
Mhm.
all of the millions of people that are
millions.
Millions.
We see you. And we love you.
Yeah, absolutely. Good thing that we just do this for us.
Yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
Not for the billions of dollars that are coming our way. No.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, I love it. So Jenna, I'm really curious, like from last week, you did a really interesting cover of some really cool tools and excitement there. So I'm wondering, like, are you gonna indulge us with some more of that, or are you gonna give us a book review?
I'm going to do a book review,
Okay.
but I will say that I am going to be posting some tips and tricks on my channel.
Okay. Fantastic.
So, and I have a website now.
Ooh.
Did I tell you?
No. Do you want to put that in?
teachingonmytiptoes.com.
Teaching on my tiptoes.
No, just teachingonmytoes.com.
Teaching on my toes.
Yeah, why do I do that? I actually wrote that out somewhere and I was like, what are you doing? That's not your website.
That's awesome.
Teachingonmytoes.com.
Teaching on my toes.
Yes. So that's like Ben Cogswell talks about having a one-stop shop.
Yeah.
So that's like kind of like the, like the lobby, if you will. And then, there's like the parent student wing and then the public wing.
Nice. That's awesome. It's good to have a central location for all of your different doodads and whatnots and so on and so forth. So that's exciting. Yeah. Teaching on my
what happens.
toes.
Teachingonmytoes.com.
Perfect. Thank you for sharing.
Of course.
Yeah.
And I've been going to the California League of Schools summer sessions.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, really good stuff.
Nice.
I sat through one on like morning messages, and I did a session, and it was okay. And you have to be okay when things are okay.
Sure.
And it was kind of like intentionally just okay because I really wanted to sputter in front of them, even though it was really uncomfortable, especially like with social anxiety. You're like, I have to be perfect because if I'm not perfect, people will look at me and think things. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I really kind of like lived in that discomfort the whole time and really clunked through it. And that's okay.
Yes.
So it was really curious to see what kind of feelings came up. Being intentionally a little discombobulated so that there were stalls, because when there were stalls, I'd be able to say things like, what are you going to do with your students when your link that you thought you linked doesn't link? Nice.
That's important to model for sure.
Yeah. So it's a lot of fun. So I've been enjoying those sessions. And then like Kim Vogue does like EdPowerment. Have you seen that?
No, I haven't.
It's this really awesome Facebook group, and she does kind of like what I'm doing for my district on that small scale. Mm-hmm. She's got like this Facebook group that's just like full of PD at 10 a.m. every day. Oh, wow. She's amazing. So that's how my week has been. Very cool. How has your week been?
It's been kind of gearing up to get back to work. So been wrapping around, getting all that done. The funny thing is that you forget like the little things, right? Like I have to remember that I have to make my lunch every day. And so like, I usually make it the day before because, in the morning I'm stumbling around trying to figure out where my keys are at. So,
right.
So it's like those little things. And then it's funny because I literally have now my to-go kit for
love it
for keeping my office and my myself protected. And then I have, my car. So I'm like trying to like get everything like spaced out and ready for like returning to the.
So you actually physically have to return to an office space?
Yeah. Which ironically is, we're in the space where like there's more, like our area is 10% higher in terms of like the number of cases, but percentage wise. than the state, and like to the point that like we're having like record numbers of people, and our hospitals are almost maxed out in ICUs and stuff like that. Like it's a pretty scary situation here.
Yeah.
And then the fact that like you know, we're on the watch list. Our county's on the watch list. Many other counties are, but like there was an article that was on our local kvp.org for the local NPR station that was talking about like it's the percentages and stuff like that, and like how we're growing, and like it does make me wonder severely about the sanity of like. In fact, we were doing our walk this morning, and I was telling my wife that like it seems odd that like we're at a higher state of like cases and that thing, and yet we're pushing harder to get back to normal in a situation where things are actually worse, when we just prove that that's not probably the pathway that we should go. And we're in a worse
Right.
place now than we were when we went into the lockdown quarantine situation
Yeah,
to begin with. So
you're so right. My district was all starting digital, but I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know if they're going to require teachers to go to their classroom. And for me, it's like I don't necessarily even want to vote in it, because for me it's so low risk, because I live like a 5-minute drive from my classroom.
right.
From my door to my classroom is a 5-minute adventure. And I don't have kids at home to leave.
Yeah.
I don't have kids at home that I have to monitor their own homeschooling.
Yeah.
And so it's like I would prefer, I don't care, but I see how I have to, or not have to, but I want to be able to say, no, I don't think teachers should have to go to their classrooms, because not everybody has the luxury of being childless and being 5 minutes from work.
Yeah. That combo is, it's pretty rare, especially like, if their teachers are required to go to work, like in their class and teach in the class. And in my county, that's kind of like the normal that I'm hearing, both where I live and where I work, both counties. Like that sounds like that's kind of because we're required to go digital to start off. And so it sounds like a lot of districts are having the teachers come into their class to teach during the day. But we were talking about this too, is like I see the benefit of the fact that like that's a space that you normally teach in anyway, so that it makes sense in that regard. And it also makes sense that like you have the opportunity to kind of like meet with your fellow teachers and like plan or to discuss and stuff like that. But the reality is like a lot of teachers have kids at home, and so what does that mean for them? And like their spouse is probably working and probably not staying at home, and so and most parents can't leave their kids at home. And so,
and you can't like daycare group a bunch of kids right now.
Right. So
like, what are you going to do?
Right. And you can't even really invite like grandma and grandpa over, because what happens if you bring that over, right? And then give it to them. Like there's really no good option. And then like, are you going to take your kids to your classroom? Because then what's the point of doing that? Because it's no different than if you just did it at home in the first place. So
right.
it's this weird, like, I saw something on a social media thing. I can't remember even where it was. I'm trying to stay out of social media this month. So, but it happened to be something I happened to glance at a second, and I don't know why or how I came across it. That's why I can't remember where it was at, but it says something to the effect that like, teachers and teaching is one of the few professions where you're asked to be treated like a professional, but always reminded that you're not. And that was in response to being like, having the teachers being required to go to campus.
Imagine a bank CEO being told that you like being like, it's a totally different scenario. Like it's so frustrating to be a part of and observe at the same time, because like I see teachers kicking butt right now. Like and the teachers who are feeling like they're not kicking butt, there are teachers out there who have their hands wide open, that are just ready to be useful, myself included. Like if you're out there and you're feeling a little lost, you need someone to talk to, Mrs. Jenna Rogers at gmail.com. Like truly, like you're not in this alone. And I think that like there's such an isolating portion of our profession, and I think that isolation comes from partly that perfection myth,
Mhm.
that poisonous comparison.
Yeah.
We really have to learn how to understand that rising tides raise all ships.
Yeah.
If someone's kicking butt, you know what I mean? Like they're making it better for all of us.
Yeah.
And at the same time, as a teacher, you're drained. You know,
Yeah.
what energy do you have to do for self-care, for meditation, when you're basically asked to bleed all day long?
Yeah.
It's hard. And it's easy for me to say, oh, find 10 minutes to meditate. But again, I don't have a baby screaming yet. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
there's got to be something we can do for ourselves as teachers, a
Mhm.
practice that we enjoy. For me, I'm a weirdo, and like making videos and having these conversations and reading books about this is what fulfills me. We're that unicorn. I think we're both like this,
Mhm.
where our hobbies and our profession dovetail so nicely that
Right.
I can feel really fulfilled, creating things and sharing things and being involved in collaborative discussions. Like that to me feels like that's the point. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
I feel that's where I'm at. I'm just like, I can't depend anymore on, I just, you also can't depend on anybody in a little bit. I'm sorry, but there's a piece where the bottom line is you have to be prepared to not have to depend on anybody,
Right.
because, pairs get sick, reading groups change,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
intervention gets canceled. Like
Yeah.
all these things happen. And so I don't mean that in a negative way. I just mean like, it's such one of the hard parts about being a teacher is having 70 plan Bs on
Mhm.
constant rotation.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And because it's such a complicated mess, our system is so complicated. Like, I remember sitting in a classroom once with a teacher she was pretty new. And, it was a fifth grade classroom, right? And so, like, there was not a single solid hour of time that wasn't interrupted by something happening. Either kids going to different groups or pull outs for this, push ins for that. And so, like, in a day, this one teacher had to deal with contingencies for every one of those specific things. Like,
Hmm.
if kids left for band, like, and the band teacher wasn't there, or that sort of thing, or if the PE teacher wasn't there, or if it was a rainy day, or if it was bad air day, right? Like, then they didn't really get a break because all the kids had to stay inside. And so, like,
Hmm.
there's all of these things that happen all the time. Not to mention, you have a bunch of really hyper kids, if they're especially on a day where they're constricted all day, like,
Or the
that's
wind is blowing, or it's a full moon. You know what I
right,
mean? Like,
right, yeah. I mean, they're
yeah.
kids. They're kids. They're naturally curious, and they're naturally energetic, and they're naturally, like, social beings that want to do stuff. Like, that's why we love them, um, and to keep them focused, and stuff like that on things like that's a tough bar under normal circumstances, let alone like
Yeah.
with all this craziness. And then, so I remember thinking that was when I first was coming down from high school teaching, and it was one of my first times, like, experiencing what elementary was like, and it made me realize, like, how much I had forgotten about what it was like to be a kid, and, like, what elementary experiences were like. And so it was really eye-opening to realize that, like, um, teaching high school kids is way easier than teaching even middle school or elementary, in the
They're
sense that,
gonna
like,
come for you now. Watch out.
right. No, I mean, in the sense of, like, like what is required of you. It's different. Like, it's still
Mhm.
exhausting. Um,
Yes.
and I think it has to do a lot with, like, who you are as a person, because, like, I love doing guest lectures, or, like, being in an elementary classroom, but there's no way. Like, I did a 2-hour math lesson in a kindergarten classroom, and I had my girls come in. I had my wife there. Like, we had props. We had, like, it took like a month to plan, and it was, like, crazy fun. And I did all these different things, and I was dancing and singing, and, like, we had all kinds of stuff. Right, it was great. But holy cow, when it was done, I was just dripped in sweat. I felt like I'd gone running for a marathon. Like, and I was like, that was just 2 hours, and that's what it took to keep them engaged for that period of time doing something. Like,
Yeah, it is a different You're absolutely right.
It's a different world to think of that in terms of like, and these teachers, we have to ask them to do that every day. And
Hmm.
then now we're doing that, not only that, but we're asking them to do that every day without much support in this really weird experience where, like, I'll be honest, I'm a pretty nerdy dude. And I feel like I'm pretty competent in technology and stuff like that. But this distance teaching thing, I was running an intervention like every day with a math teacher for 4th through 8th grade kids for a couple of weeks, for a little over a month, and it was great. It was a wonderful experience. But holy cow, every day I felt like I was a brand new teacher, like
Right.
trying to figure
Yeah.
things out. Like it's a different experience, teaching online, and
Yes.
super powerful, super inviting. Like I think there's a lot of potential there, but oh my gosh. Anyways, that's us around.
I'm looking forward to it because I feel like I'm into it. I'm here
Yeah.
for it. That's what the kids say these days. I'm here for it. I'm all about. I always said I'm all about it, but now it's like I'm here for it. I'm like,
That's
that's so
funny.
cute.
Yeah.
That's so cute.
I like it.
What I like about what's going to happen in my instruction, and it depends. And here's the thing: like, if you read the language for the legislation, it's like SB 98 or SB 96.
Mhm.
There's like some bizarre language in there that's like the first thing. It's like, like the local education agency, whether that's the
Mhm.
district or the school, will
Mhm.
be responsible for childcare. I think
Mhm.
there's like in that first thing.
Yeah.
And then there's this piece that's like, oh, and the schools it'll be not the schools, but the local education agency will be responsible for ensuring attendance. So it's
Wow.
not
Yeah.
going to be the teacher's job. And I plan on being like, excuse me, I'm here to teach all day long. But hunting down kids, the legislation flat out says is your turf.
Right.
So
'Cause-
I'm hopeful that that's the way that it's expected to go.
Let's hope. Yeah. That's just crazy. Like,
I'm looking forward to it though. I'm looking forward to being able to
yeah.
drill down. I'm looking
Yeah.
forward to kids like in a less anxious situation potentially.
Mhm.
Not that a home can't be anxiety riddling,
Right.
but like, like I'm curious what's going to happen with student achievement,
Yeah.
especially for districts that are really rolling this out with fidelity and with professional development.
Yeah. Which is a unicorn right now because most are still trying to figure out like how to get devices to people and stuff like that. So,
Hmm.
but
I'm not pretending this is going to be easy,
yeah,
but
no, it won't be. But they'll be varying degrees of success, I'm sure. So, um, anyways, yeah, that was fun. Sorry about the detour there.
no, we're into it.
Yeah, why don't you tell us
You
about your
and
book
I,
there?
buddy.
Let's just go for it. I'm curious. You have your book there. What did you?
I do. So I am writing a book, a novel
Wait,
that
you're
flirts
writing
with,
a book?
yes, I'm
You're
writing a novel
oh,
called
nice.
Stratum.
Okay.
And it's based on a world that is so highly stratified and classist that like
Hmm.
like you can't go up and down in stratum. So if you're born at a certain stratum,
Yeah.
that's the stratum that you're stuck at for the rest of your life.
Oh wow.
So there's like slave stratum all the way up to royal stratum.
Okay.
And there's no mobility between these stratifications.
Gotcha.
So the world opens on that, and it's like, like passing of the guard to the next heir. And then, but little does she know, of course, there's mechanisms going on in the background that are built to bring something about.
Hmm.
Don't want to give it away because it's like most stories, like that action point happens like almost like the end of the book, and in this like action point happens pretty early on. So I don't want to ruin anything. But in the end, you have these humans who are used to being separated by class and situation,
Hmm.
who are now living side by side, and they have to figure out how to function where they used to be enemies. And of course,
Hmm.
because of the stratification, there's this deep resentment and mistrust that people are going to have to overcome if this new society is going to function at all.
Hmm. Wow.
So I kind of
That's really
struggled.
cool.
I got all the way through like to act one, and I really struggled. And so one of my Twitter friends, Margaret, I'll put her link on my channel down below.
Yeah.
She suggested Save the Cat writes a novel, and it's delightful. And what I found out is like I've got some pretty good instincts, but
Yeah.
because I followed some of this without really paying attention to it, without
Mm.
knowing about it. But like, there's a lot of really interesting details that really are helping me like kind of plan out intentionally.
Oh,
And
nice.
so I'm
Okay.
gonna just kind of go through, and with my erasable, it's one of my favorite pens. Are you a dork that has a favorite pen as well?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I love me a good friction clicker. Ooh, this
Nice.
is erasable.
Oh, that's awesome.
So figure like when this book is done and I've sold millions of copies, I'll either go through this book with another color for
Yeah,
my next novel, or I'll just buy one and like write in it for that novel.
that's
And then
funny.
it'll be like for every novel I write, it will
Yeah,
have a Save the Cat note. It's not meant to be a notebook, it's a book.
yeah.
But it, yeah, so that's what
Well,
I'm reading.
I love that idea. And when your book sells millions of copies too, you can also big sell it as like a what do you call it? Like a bonus or like an extra. Like this is
All
what
right, like my
inspired.
notes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The behind the scenes, whatever, right? Like,
The millions that I will pour into my community, because I've already said, like, even after Stratum is like the New York bestseller and we've gotten the $500 million movie deal, we're still going
yeah,
to live in Lake County.
yeah, absolutely.
And I get to take like half of the wealth over a certain amount. Like, this is the agreement. If I make $100 million, I get to take $50 million and
Mhm.
spend it in my community as I see fit.
There you go.
David's already agreed to it.
That's
So
that's fair enough. And 50
here we
million is
go.
plenty to live very well on. So
Yeah, we'll be fine.
yeah, I think you'll be okay. I mean, you make that now roughly anyway, so it's fine.
Right.
Yeah.
So true. So true. And then I'm almost done with Coraline, and it's the
Oh,
first
nice.
Neil
Okay.
Gaiman book that I've read.
Mm-hmm.
And poor Neil Gaiman, I feel this way like about really classic movies too. Like
Mm-hmm.
sometimes the plot is so seamlessly written and it just flows so effortlessly that you
Mm.
get to the end of the book and you're almost like, well, that was no work for that author.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of like what Coraline is like. It's different than the movie in a lot of
Interesting.
ways,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
in the best ways. Like in the book, it's really from her point of view. There's
Right.
no like secondary character to distract you from her imagination and her dark thoughts, and it's almost like a more intimate experience than
Mm-hmm.
when you're watching the movie with the set and the cast and all the other characters who take up as much screen, if not more,
Mm-hmm.
than Coraline. Whereas in the book, being told from her point of view, she's the biggest character in the story
Right.
instead of the other mother. Which for me, it changes it, and it's just kind of a fun perspective.
That's really cool. I like that idea. I hadn't thought of it that way, but you're absolutely right. Like wow, how you change when you change the point of view from which the story is told, even though it's told from her perspective. Like I guess let me put how do I say this? So when it's the point of view, but like you as the spectator are watching it from that specific right? It's the
Yes.
difference of like I'm thinking in photography, right? Where like if you take a picture of something, where everyone stands, like that's the common view, so it's not that interesting. But if you change your perspective, right, from above or from below or from behind or
Mm-hmm.
something like that, all of a sudden that change of perspective makes the image much more interesting. And that's
Yeah.
exactly it's the same idea that you're just mentioning there, where like um, in the book it's from her eyes out, whereas in the movie you're a third person observing the experience.
And that's why books are so powerful. Like,
Hmm.
I've won the Hunger Games. I graduated from Hogwarts. Like,
Yeah.
I can't remember who said it, but there's someone very, some name said the quote, "A reader lives 1,000 lifetimes,"
Hmm.
whereas people who don't read only have one.
Hmm.
And it's so true. And then Ken Shelton talks about how books are not only mirrors, but they're also windows.
Hmm.
And, for some, children of color or children from certain cultures, they don't have those windows in our classroom library, or they don't have
Yeah,
mirrors. They
yeah,
only have windows.
yeah.
Um, and so I think like being aware of like the purpose of story, like I feel like if some major money-backed, like, motion picture human wanted COVID to matter, they
Mhm.
would be pouring tons and tons of money into documentaries,
Mhm.
a docu-series even, of the people who are dying,
Yeah.
and the people who have to say goodbye to them, or the
Yeah.
people who've already had to say goodbye to them, because stories they're how we understand each other.
Yeah.
And I feel like if that came out, if this massive, effort came out and people were really faced to deal with the tragedy that's happening, they might have a little bit more flexibility in their thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially when you consider like we're almost at 150,000 now that have said goodbye. Like that
Yeah,
sucks.
it's such an interesting dichotomy of, like, one American life is even one is super important, to 150 is not super important.
Hmm.
It's a challenging dichotomy to live in,
Hmm.
especially if people you're close with um, see things differently.
Hmm.
It's kind of like hard to find some middle ground. But
Yeah.
I think that's important. I know that there's people out there who think that, if you have a certain point of view, then it means this about your morals and
Hmm.
about how much respect you deserve. But I don't believe that. I
Mm.
I don't think that that's how you change society.
Hmm.
But just like you don't change a kid who's having behavior issues, you don't change them by, just telling them that they're wrong all day.
Right. Right. Or kick him out of the
So,
classroom or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, like, you find out what's important to that kid so that you can reach that kid, so you can build
Hmm.
a relationship with that kid, so that kid knows that you're on their side,
Hmm.
so that they feel safe enough to fail in front of you.
Yeah.
How can they fail in front of you if you're making them feel bad because they don't have a pencil?
Yeah. It's crazy. It's a good point. It's funny. It's just kind of related and kind of off topic, but last night I was watching Zootopia, right? Because like
Zootopia.
it's
I
one of
love that, like, the every song, everything song.
yeah. And actually, it was funny because I had the subtitles on, and so I was the power of like hearing the song and then like reading the words. Like that whole song is about like failure, right? Like
Yeah.
and how to make mistakes and like how to keep trying and stuff like that. And it started at the very beginning. As I was watching it, I was like, this is like there's a clip where her dad and her are talking when she like right at the very beginning where she was wanting to become she's 9 years old and she's like wanting to be a cop
Mhm.
and the dad and mom are their very first sentence. It's meant to be funny, but it's like so true. Like they're all. Did you ever wonder why your mom and I are so happy? And
Mhm.
she's all, not really. And then they're all, well, we decided, we gave up on our dreams and we settled, and that was the secret. And I was like, that's funny, and that's also really sad because I think that's so often the case in life. And then it was just like the whole time that scene they're walking down this fair thing, and
Mhm.
the dad's like trying to like reason with her to like
I
protect her.
literally just watched this scene and I have no idea why, but because I haven't sat down and watched Zootopia. But,
Yeah,
like, as you're talking, I'm like, I know exactly where you are in that movie. I
that's
literally just saw
hilarious.
that piece.
That's funny. Yeah, because like for me, I was thinking like I want to take that clip and like snip it out because that's such a perfect example of how like we as adults do harm to kids, or
Mhm.
we as a society. Like you can make the metaphor as big as you wanted it to, but that's like a lot of times like that's how we end up like in our mode to like protect, like or to like think we know better. Like we try to like save or
Yeah.
protect or whatever that our kids or even our human beings, right? Like at the same time like our intention's good but the outcome is not right. And so like
Right.
she has the resilience and this growth mindset perspective of like like especially when her dad says no bunny's ever become a cop, and then she's
Right.
like she pauses for a second and she goes, well then I guess I'll have to be the first one, and then continues on her way. And I was thinking like it's those rare people like that make that difference, that
Yes.
and like um they can rally against it because like I know myself like uh I've been dealing with some identity stuff and like some mental health stuff,
Mhm.
and kind of coming out of it, and like figuring out like like to be able to say that like I am worth it and I am okay, and like,
That's right.
you know what I mean, and like that's
Yep.
what's so cool, like talking with you and having you've had that journey as well, and like and you know you're realizing like you know I didn't realize that at 40 years old I would be like at this place where like I'm dealing with stuff that you think should have been resolved when you were 17, right? And that it was different back then. Uh, and then you realize it's just part of that process of your life. Like this is ever going on, you know? And like uh,
Yeah.
it's cool because like uh, I think that like to do the same thing over and over again, right? Like you're not likely to get a different result. And so things have changed. And so I'm thinking like yesterday, like I rarely, so one of my issues just, you know, this isn't a therapy session, but like one of my issues is I usually keep everything bottled in, right? Like I never
Mm-hmm.
like, I'm like that pressure cooker, right? Like I just hold everything in until like at some point it explodes, and usually it's not a good thing when it does, right? And then I bottle
Mm-hmm.
everything back up in again. I clean up the mess and put everything back in, and like nothing happened. And so I've been trying to like let the pressure out a little bit and like talk
Good.
about like the things that I'm thinking. And it's weird because like after I do that, like a little bit later, I'm like I feel better. Like it actually helps, you know. And
It's scary, I bet. The first time you were like, okay, I'm gonna let a little pressure out. I bet
yeah,
that was scary.
yeah, it is. It is. And then like one of the big clicks for me was to realize that like not only am I okay and I'm worth it, like um, there was a time when like I didn't care what other people thought about me or
Mm-hmm.
like that, you know. And I don't know when that changed or how I got there, but like that was a good place, and that's where I'm coming back to. And it feels like
Yes.
it's a good spot to like maintain that balance, you know what I mean, and like figuring out like how to keep that going when
And that's so important. I mean, that's so important. I'm just an overwhelmer. I
Mhm.
drink from the fire hose. I jump in the deep end.
Yeah,
And
same
that
here.
has all of the risks. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't
Yeah.
want to paint it's a different option
Hmm.
than what reasonable cautious humans do. And those reasonable caution humans, their tactic is just as valid. It just
Hmm.
doesn't fit me. And
Right.
so I can get really insecure if I share too much, if I put too much content out on one day.
Mm.
And so I have a self practice that I do when
Hmm.
after like I've had a long, like something like this,
Hmm.
where, I know this is going to go out, and I have like a self care routine where I'm going to go take, a bubble bath before I hop on to the next session. And so
Nice.
I have to like pre-plan
Yeah.
self-care triage after I have engaged in what I think is important and valuable,
Right.
even though it's scary.
Right. I dig that. I dig
Because
that a
it is
lot.
hard. It's hard. There's a great quote that I go back to over and over and over again, and it is that what other people think of me is none of my business.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think that is part of why I'm someone who does not give half a crap about the outcome. I mean, if it's meant for other people,
Hmm.
and what I mean by that is not that I don't care about the outcome, that more that I trust the work I do and I
Hmm.
trust the processes that I go through
Hmm.
enough that I understand that if someone looks at something I've done, or they're looking at something that I've said, and it upsets them, and they decide to tell me it upsets them, I'm now capable of being like, like, gosh, I'm really sorry, and at the same time inside
Yeah.
not feel like I have to give away pieces of myself.
Mm.
I had a
Nice.
really hard time socially as a younger lady.
Hmm.
And when I was younger, I thought it was because I was chubby. Like, oh, if I wasn't fat, everybody would love me and it would be great. And of course, that's not true, right?
Right. Right.
And it has like, it's so weird to be 40 and still feel like you're not allowed at the pool table because you weren't invited when you were in high school.
Right. Right.
And I don't know how many other people feel that way,
Yeah.
but it's a constant battle with yourself,
Hmm.
because you're constantly telling that teenager inside of you that, like, that's just not your path. That's just not your path. Look down at the path. Look down at your feet now and look
Right.
around and see what you have.
Yeah.
That wasn't your path. And thank God it wasn't your path,
Yeah.
because I feel like somehow, some way, me being protected from that culture, it was a protection. Do you know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? Like, I was able to build value systems within myself that had nothing to do with what other people felt or thought.
Right.
Because I was like, well, I'm a social lost cause anyway, so it doesn't matter. I'll just do whatever I want.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think, like, all of us, we carry something inside of us
Mm-hmm.
that is hidden behind a door.
Mm-hmm.
But behind that door, when you open it, there's something valuable that your students need.
Yeah.
By accessing that part of me that always feels like an outsider, part of my hidden curriculum is, how do I include students?
Right. Absolutely. I love that. And I also think too, in that same regard, like, you know, if we're going to call a spade, like in our little worlds, like I remember getting on like Twitter, for example, and like seeing all these people and like, the term of celebrities kind of, it's played itself out a little bit now, but like, a few years ago, that was certainly a thing. And like, I remember going, oh my gosh, you're so-and-so. And then getting to know so-and-so and realizing that they have the same insecurities and they have the same sort of things, and we're all humans, so like I see that now as part of that process of how like we need to be reticent that like we're all human beings and like we all have these issues, and like I my confidence in like presenting or in leading professional developments or in being in front of kids and teaching lessons, like all of those things took a huge hit, and like I was very honestly like in a place where like I was really not sure if that was like was I ever okay at that kind of thing, and then
Yeah.
and like seeking out like feedback from others, like it's hard to figure out ways to like even ask the question that you're looking for, because if you usually do like a survey or or you ask kids like, hey, how was that, like you get the usual brush off of like, oh, that's great, or that's crap, right? Or you rarely get
Right.
insightful feedback.
Yes.
And then when you do get insightful feedback, or when you do have those gems that you want to hold on to, like then are you open to receiving that, like, and that was something else that was hard to realize, is that like something that you thought was really cool or really awesome, and like it didn't, while it may have been, like the fact that it wasn't received by others as such means that there's a disconnect, and maybe it wasn't as cool for them, or maybe they couldn't see the same thing that you see, right? Like um and so uh there's just like a lot to think about in that regard, and like how do you keep those ideas, like I think of a lot of like famous people now, like so I just read Truman's book this year, right? So he at the time when he was president was not very popular and was not thought of very well as a president. Like he thought a lot of people thought he was like a horrible president essentially. And now at some point that legacy changed, and now he's considered a decent president. Like he did a lot of really good things. He foresaw some things and helped. Maybe it wasn't the best path, but it was certainly a path forward that was more
Right.
you know reticent than other pathways could have been, right? So like history is a fair plays a role in how we perceive him, but how did he know, or how did he move forward with the strength to do those things? And that's just one example, right? Where like you think of like
Right.
I was reading about Joan of Arc in another lifetime, and like how did she have the strength to do what she did,
Right.
and like there's these like, so like part of
Remind me, how old was Joan of Arc? She was something stupid young.
Yeah, it's been long enough now. There's just a reference to something about her that made me think about that. So I think she was like 21 or 18 to 20 something when
Oh, in my head, I had her like as like a 12-year-old or a
she
13-year-old.
started out. She did, yeah. No, and when she got burned at the stake, when she was finally, in fact, probably should Google that right now.
I wonder what that says about society, right? Where you have someone who's like just trying to do good,
Yeah,
and it's like, burn the witch.
yeah. No, it's serious, and like and I feel so often that like yeah, so she was born in 1412 and she died in 1431. So, um, but like,
Yeesh.
yeah, like, what is that? 8 and then 10, 18, and then, yeah, 20. 19.
Well, and then I think about there was like some, I don't know the names, but there was some like, and this could be wrong. I could be remembering it wrong or recalling it wrong or restating it wrong. Where it was like a mathematician who like either like refused, it was like some equation that like he refused, or like some equation that he found that he wouldn't shut up about. And like he spent his whole life because of this like this teeny tiny disagreement about, I don't remember what it was, but it was the idea of like just this like teeny tiny thing, the idea of like disagreeing with the mathematical theory, and you spend your whole life in jail, like
right. Yeah, exactly. It's
like old timey jail, like bricks and birds and stuff, you know?
yeah, it's just so crazy. So I'm on a rant again, but the point is like that balance of like moving forward, like with something, like how do you have the strength to do that? And when you receive feedback that it's not, and then also like how do you take that feedback and realize that like, okay, this part I need to keep, this part I need to reject, you know? And like Ed Campos, I don't know if you know him.
Yes.
He quotes Bruce Lee saying that is becoming kind of like a new, like every time I think about it, it kind of has a new resonance with me, which is adopt what's useful, right? And then reject what's not. Basically, that's a really bad paraphrase of it, but basically you take in what is helpful and then reject whatever is not. And I'm trying to get to a point in my head where like, where it's like water off the duck's back, right? I have this visual image of like, that's where I want to get to, where like I'm in a sea of shit, and like, you know, and that you can just, ducks can just go through it and it doesn't stick to them, you know, they just do their thing and they get out and they shake it off and they move on. And so it's kind of like, I don't know
I
why
think it's
that's the
that,
visual.
well, like they're built that way, right?
Yeah,
Like that's the thing, is like we're not built with those kind of pieces. We used to survive with each other. Like we would have our backs because that would be how we ate.
Yeah.
You know, we're very different now that we're very human.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do, because I struggle with that too, where sometimes I'll be in the middle of working on something and maybe like a voice of resentment, like I have that jerk voice in my head, I call her Myth.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes she'll be like, why are you working so hard? No one's going to pay attention.
Oh,
Do you know what I mean?
yeah.
Or no one's really going to look, or no one really cares.
Yeah.
Like those voices happen, right? And like, or sometimes she'll say something like, you're only doing this so people will, you know. And what I do in those moments where I feel like, oh, maybe I'm looking too much for outward validation, I take a moment and I pause and I imagine a crowd full of me, a crowd of Jennas applauding the Jenna on the stage. And it's like, yeah, I can fill my own bucket. I don't need someone else's marble because I've got a whole, you know, marble factory right here inside of myself.
There you go.
And so I think, I don't know if there's ever a point in which it stops hurting or you stop caring. I think that the synapses fire of, ooh, that person thinks this about me, and the applauding crowd of myself, that feels like it's shorter and shorter and shorter. Now, if I'm under duress, this takes some time.
Right.
But I feel like, you know, when you practice, I like to call it if-then planning. So like, if I know David's gonna leave the house, I tell him flat out, do not bring back any food, no fast food, nothing like that, because I will eat chicken nuggets. I love chicken nuggets.
Who
but
doesn't?
like, so
They're
it's like
delicious.
if-then planning, right? Like if David brings home chicken nuggets, then I make myself a quick side salad first. You know what I mean? Like that if-then planning, because you know, we're perfect and it's not going to happen every day.
Right.
So what are you reading, my friend?
Wow, that's just a great discussion, Jenna. I think in terms of time, I'll just say that I'm still reading through my Skeptic's Guide book. I'm about 100 pages into it now, so I'm reading it at night. So one of the things, like, because it's such a big book and I have a lot of other things that I'm trying to read too, I decided that one of the things that I like to read, the Truman book, I read like 6 pages a night, and it's just kind of like my wind down, shut down time. So I'm not reading
Oh
6
yeah.
pages. I'm just kind of reading like until I get tired. Um, and it's funny because it's one of those things where like it actually makes me think more. So
I
you'd
was
think it
gonna
would.
say that's dangerous because
It
I've
gives
done
me
that too. Where it's like I'm just gonna read for 5 minutes, and then
yeah.
it's like the end of the book, and it's 3 in the morning.
Yeah. So luckily I do it when I'm tired, and because it does make me think, it actually does kind of like, it's like doing mental exercise, right? So like I'm like, oh gosh, I can't, the words start to cross, and I'm like, okay, and then I'm able to sleep, and I sleep really soundly, so that's really nice. So I'm just into that, and it's interesting how they're choosing to gap or group things. So right now I'm reading. They're in the ad hominem, well, in the fallacy section, and like, um, and so when I learned about fallacies in English in college, it was critical thinking was the English 2 class I had, um, and I remember thinking about like trying to like categorize all the different fallacies, and like I'd never heard of them before, so like understanding like what they are
Mm-hmm.
like on a basic level seemed pretty easy, but man, was it hard for me at the time to like identify the fallacy, right? Like in
Right.
an everyday, like in a news clipping or in an argument, that kind of thing. Um, and I don't know if it's because I'm older now, or because my brain's had more time to think about it, or because it's in the section of the book. But man, when you read something, like it's very obvious, like that, and that's a new experience for me. So it's been kind of fun to like read that and go, I can very clearly see why that is that fallacy kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then the
I
danger of
wish we would all subscribe and agree that logical fallacies
yeah,
are like the way we should all look at
yeah,
things.
absolutely.
I really do. I think it would break down so many barriers if
Hmm.
people were really genuinely willing to admit that some thinking could possibly be flawed.
Yeah. Well, and then like the thing that's so great about it is the balance, right? Like so much of it depends on um like context and meaning.
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
I love the example of the ad hominem, right? Like attacking someone, because that's something that you see a lot in political kinds
Oh,
of
yes.
art. So you
In
attack some,
politics, right? Like,
yeah, yeah,
here's a statement, here's
yeah,
something about that person. Well,
yeah,
wait a minute.
yeah. Like they're attacking the person, and then that's supposed to discredit the argument, right? And so um, in the book, the example I loved was that they said someone could be a jackass and have a point. That's not an ad hominem if you call him a jackass. But if you use the fact that you called him a jackass to discredit the argument, that's an ad hominem, right? So like it depends on how you use it, and like, so
Mhm.
you have to be able to decipher for the two between the two, and like and the connections between. So someone can be simultaneously a jackass and right,
Yeah.
or someone can be a jackass and wrong. But why they're wrong doesn't necessarily have to do with the fact that they're a jackass.
Right. Because they
So
can be nice and wrong. I
yeah,
agree.
they can also be nice and wrong. So
It makes
um,
me think of The Big Lebowski. Did you
yeah.
ever watch?
Oh, that's one of my favorite
Am
movies.
I
Yeah.
wrong? Am I wrong? No, Donnie, you're not wrong. You're just an asshole.
So yeah.
And I mean, I feel like Donnie sometimes.
Yeah, that's hilarious that you bring that up. That is so great. Oh, good. Oh,
Well, I'm glad that you have a book you're going to be sinking your teeth into for next week. I'm going to
mhm.
continue sinking my teeth into this book.
Excellent.
I know you're going like back to work like tomorrow, right? Like
Yeah,
soon.
yeah.
My district pushed back instruction for a week,
Oh, nice.
so we'll see what happens.
Yeah, yeah,
It's
and we'll.
just another day in education. No one has an
Yeah,
idea about what's going to happen.
yeah,
We're
and
all completely clueless.
and on that note, I'll stop the recording.